hey there, Marie Greene from Olive Knits here, and today for Knitting Rescue 911, I'm going to show you how to fix a split stitch two different ways. The first way is if you are able to catch that split while it's still on the needles and it's not so far back that you can't get to it, we're going to drop back down and grab that stitch again and bring it back up. This is really similar to fixing a drop stitch. So I have a stitch right here that is, you can see down there where it's split. So we're going to just pull that stitch right off of the needle and drop it down one row at a time, just gently kind of pulling those little strands out of the stitches until we get back to the stitch where that split happened. And here you can see we're right there, it's pulling out of that split strand. All right, so now what we want to do is we're going to use our handy crochet hook. You can use either a crochet hook that is the same size as your knitting needles or a little bit smaller. I like to go a little smaller myself, but if it affects your gauge and you can't get your stitches to look even with the others, then use a crochet hook that is the same size as your knitting needles. I'm going to go through the center of that stitch, and I just want to make sure, since it's kind of gotten tugged apart a little bit with that split, that I've got all of those strands. So you just want to check that. And then we'll grab the loop above it, that little ladder rung, and just bring it through. And now we've grabbed the split, we've saved it, and we're just going right up the rungs of each of these little strands between stitches so that we can move that working yarn there so that we can get this back on our needles. And now the stitch is no longer split and it has been rescued. Now I'm going to show you how to do a fix for a split stitch after it's too late to go back and fix it like this. Sometimes you've already bound off and then you find a split stitch later. Let me show you how to fix that one. It's just a little different. All right, so here we have a split stitch and I've already bound off. Now, obviously, if my piece were only really this big, I would probably go back and fix it before I bound off. But let's imagine this is way down the sleeve on your sweater or somewhere on the body of a big project where you can't go back and fix it. At least not the way we did in the last example. All right, so in this case, what we really want to do is not only disguise or hide this split because it looks unsightly, but also, if you look, it's not very sturdy on that stitch where it's only grabbed one little strand of that fiber. So we want to reinforce it too. So what you want to do is take a yarn needle and matching yarn. And if you're repairing something on a sweater where you don't have the yarn anymore, you can usually get away with doing this with something pretty close. It's not going to be super noticeable, but you do want it to match, so do your best. All right, so what we want to do is we want to kind of identify where that split happened. And we're going to take the tip of our yarn needle. We're going to go up through from the bottom, up through the center of the stitch underneath where the split was. So the split is up here. We're going to go up underneath the stitch below it, just like this. And what this is going to do is allow us to get in through the center of that split stitch. So that's how we're going to reinforce that spot. Now we're going to take our needle, and I actually am going to dip the other split part of that stitch kind of down through the center so we don't see it anymore. Now I'm just going to focus on the stitch, kind of recreating where that stitch is supposed to be. So I've come up through the center of the stitch below it. Now I'm going to take the tip of my yarn needle and go underneath both legs of the stitch above it, just like this. We're reinforcing by recreating that stitch. See, now we have one leg in place. Pull that a little tight. Now I'm going to come back down and we're going to go right back down the center of the stitch that we started through when we first brought it up. So what we've done here is create basically a whole new stitch where that split stitch used to be. So it's gone just kind of over it, but it's not just cosmetic because it did also pull through the legs of that full split stitch. Now you don't see all of those strands because those little extra bits will be at the back, but it has reinforced it so it will be safer now, and we don't have to worry about that pulling apart or breaking and then causing a big drop stitch fiasco. All right, once you get the new stitch created, you're going to very gently tie this off on the back side, really gently, because if you tighten this up too much, you'll notice where you made the change. So just do one gentle little tie, and then you can take a yarn needle and weave in these ends really gently on the wrong side. And my favorite way to do that is just by following the natural revolutions of the stitches that are already there. So I'm just going to go kind of follow along in the little path of the stitches on the wrong side, and then that way I'm just weaving my little fix into place so that it's not obvious, but then it's also tucked quite neatly away and I don't have to worry about this stitch coming out. Now I'd probably do that just a little bit further and go ahead and cut it, and then do the same on the other side with the other strand of yarn. And that, my friend, is how you can save a split stitch, either while you're still working on it, just by dropping down, or by just bringing in a yarn needle and some thread and kind of fixing it after the fact by creating a new stitch right over where that stitch used to be. So if you find that it's a little too loose or a little too tight, all you have to do is just tug on it just a little bit to make sure that it is consistent with the rest of your knitting. And there you go. If you love learning new knitting tips and tricks, be sure to like and follow me here on YouTube so you'll be the first to know when new videos are available.